In the summer of 2006, beekeepers across the United States opened their hives expecting the low hum of a healthy colony. Instead, they found silence. Millions of bees had simply vanished. No bodies, no swarm, no trace. The queen was still there, the honey was still there, but the workers were gone, as if they had walked out of their own lives and never come back. Scientists called it colony collapse disorder, and for a while, nobody could explain it. Farmers panicked. Almond growers in California, a state that grows roughly 80% of the world's almonds and whose orchards depend almost entirely on honeybees for pollination, watched their entire industry teeter on the edge of collapse. One tiny insect, disappearing quietly, was enough to threaten the food on your table. But here's the part that should really unsettle you. This wasn't the first time bees had shaped the fate of human civilization. It happened before, thousands of years earlier, in ways history books rarely mention. And the story of how a small, buzzing insect ended up controlling the survival of humanity is one of the strangest, most overlooked stories on the planet. Before we go further, if you're the kind of person who likes discovering the hidden threads that connect nature to human survival, hit that like button and subscribe, because Origin Tales is about to take you somewhere you didn't expect a video about bees to go. To understand how we got here, we have to go back. Not just centuries, millions of years. Long before humans existed, long before flowers even had the shapes we recognize today, insects and plants were locked in a silent negotiation that would eventually decide the fate of nearly every land ecosystem on Earth. Around 120 million years ago, during the age of dinosaurs, the world was a very different place. Plants reproduced mostly through wind and water, scattering pollen blindly and hoping for the best. It was wasteful, inefficient, a gamble with almost no odds of paying off. Then something changed. Flowering plants began to appear, and with them came a new strategy. Instead of relying on chance, plants started offering a reward: nectar. Sweet, energy-rich nectar, designed to lure insects close enough to accidentally carry pollen from one flower to another. It was a quiet trick, but it was about to rewrite the rules of life on Earth. At first, this wasn't about bees specifically. Beetles, flies, and early pollinating insects were the first customers drawn in by the sugar, unaware they were being used. But evolution is relentless, and somewhere in that ancient chaos of forests and swamps, something strange was stirring. A lineage of wasp-like insects began shifting away from hunting prey. Instead of chasing other insects, they started eating pollen instead of meat. No one could have imagined where this tiny change would lead. There was no explosion, no meteor, no single dramatic moment that announced what was happening. Just a slow, patient shift in diet, unfolding quietly while dinosaurs walked overhead, completely unaware they were witnessing the birth of one of Earth's most important partnerships. Here's the part almost nobody realizes. We actually have physical proof of this transformation, frozen in time. Fossil evidence, particularly amber specimens found decades ago, gives us a frozen glimpse of these transitional creatures. Trapped in tree resin for millions of years, preserved down to the fine hairs on their legs, these early bee ancestors tell a story most people never hear. Plants and insects weren't just coexisting, they were quietly building a partnership that neither species could survive without, though neither of them knew it yet. Yet the story was far from over. Tens of millions of years passed. Bees diversified into thousands of different species, adapting to different flowers, different climates, different survival strategies. And here's something most people never learn. Even today, the vast majority of bee species, well over 90%, are still solitary. A female builds her own small nest, lays her own eggs, and never joins a hive at all. Most of the bees on this planet were never architects of empires. They were quiet, private creatures, working alone. But one branch of the bee family tree, evolving many millions of years after that first shift from hunting to pollen, took a radical gamble. Instead of living alone, they began living together, cooperating, sharing labor, building complex nests with defined roles. This was the birth of social bees, the ancestors of honeybees and bumblebees, and it changed everything, at least for that branch of the family tree. Think about what that actually meant. A solitary insect can only gather so much food, defend itself in limited ways, and survive only as long as its own body allows. A colony is different. A colony can specialize. Some bees defend, some bees forage, some bees care for the young. Some bees even regulate the temperature inside the nest by vibrating their wing muscles to generate heat, like a living furnace made of thousands of tiny bodies. A colony isn't just a group of individuals anymore. It becomes something closer to a single organism, spread across thousands of bodies, moving with shocking coordination. This is where honeybees enter the story. And here's where things get personal, because for the first time, this ancient insect drama intersects with us. Around 7,000 years ago, somewhere in the forests and cliffs of ancient Africa and the Middle East, early humans discovered something extraordinary. Wild bee colonies, tucked into rock crevices and hollow trees, were producing something unlike anything else in nature. A thick, golden substance packed with calories, resistant to spoiling and intensely sweet in a world that had almost no access to sugar. Honey. But getting that honey wasn't easy. It meant facing thousands of defensive insects armed with stingers, climbing dangerous cliffs and risking serious injury, sometimes death. And yet, humans did it anyway. Rock art discovered in the Cuevas de la Araña in Spain, estimated by archaeologists to be roughly 8,000 years old, shows a human figure climbing a rope ladder toward a wild hive surrounded by a swarm of angry bees. Think about that for a moment. Someone, thousands of years before written history, risked their life dangling from a cliff, reaching into a storm of stinging insects, just to steal something sweet. That single image tells us something important. Honey wasn't just food, it was worth dying for. As human societies grew more organized, this dangerous relationship began to shift. In ancient Egypt, bees weren't just tolerated, they were revered. Bees appeared in hieroglyphics as symbols of royalty, connected directly to the pharaohs themselves. Egyptian beekeepers developed one of the earliest known systems of managed beekeeping, using cylindrical clay hives stacked along the Nile. Historical records suggest that as the river flooded seasonally, beekeepers would transport their hives on rafts, following the blooming flowers up and down the water, in what many historians consider one of the earliest known forms of migratory beekeeping. Honey became currency. It became medicine. Egyptian physicians used it to treat wounds, understanding, long before modern science confirmed it, that honey had natural antibacterial properties. Bodies were even preserved using honey in certain embalming practices believed to protect the dead in the afterlife. Yet Egypt was only one chapter in a much larger obsession spreading across the ancient world. In ancient Greece, bees took on a different meaning entirely. Philosophers saw the beehive as the ultimate symbol of order. Aristotle, one of history's greatest minds, studied bee colonies obsessively, trying to understand their behavior. He believed, incorrectly, that the queen bee was actually a king ruling over a hierarchy of loyal subjects. It would take nearly 2,000 years for that mistake to be corrected. Greek temples used beeswax candles in sacred rituals. Honey was offered to the gods. Entire myths were built around bees, including stories claiming that the god Zeus himself was fed honey as an infant, hidden in a cave and protected by sacred bees. Meanwhile, across the Roman Empire, beekeeping became big business. Roman writers documented detailed instructions for managing hives, protecting bees from disease, and maximizing honey production. Wealthy Romans built elaborate apiaries. Beeswax was used for writing tablets, for sealing documents, for candles that lit the halls of senators. In many ways, bees quietly powered the infrastructure of one of the largest empires in human history, without a single Roman fully understanding how essential their role in agriculture truly was. Because here's the deeper truth hiding beneath all of this ancient fascination. Humans loved bees for honey and wax. But very few people, for thousands of years, understood the real reason bees mattered: pollination. While emperors built monuments and philosophers debated politics, bees were quietly doing something far more important than producing sweet syrup. Here's the part almost nobody realized at the time. Every time a bee landed on a flower to sip nectar, a little bit of pollen stuck to its body. When it flew to the next flower, that pollen rubbed off and the plant could reproduce. Fruit could form, seeds could grow. Multiply that by billions of flower visits happening every single day across countless fields and forests, and you start to see the scale of what was really going on. And it wasn't only bees. Butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, birds, bats, and thousands of other bee species besides honeybees were all quietly doing the same work, each specialized for different flowers, different climates, different corners of the world. It was a vast, invisible workforce, and honeybees were only one part of it, even if history would eventually make them the most famous. Without that process, repeating quietly in the background of history, many of the fruits, vegetables, and nuts that fed growing human populations simply wouldn't exist. And here's the twist. Ancient farmers had no idea any of this was happening. They noticed that crops grown near flowering fields seemed to do better, so they kept planting that way without ever understanding why. It was a silent, invisible service, hiding in plain sight for thousands of years, unnoticed and unappreciated. That ignorance was about to have massive consequences. As human civilization expanded across continents, the movement of bees also expanded, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by devastating accident. When European colonizers began crossing the Atlantic in the 1600s and 1700s, they carried more than just settlers and supplies. They carried honeybee colonies, packed carefully into wooden crates, transported across brutal ocean voyages. These bees were not native to the Americas. Before European arrival, the continent had thousands of native pollinator species, but not honeybees as we know them today. When honeybees were introduced to North America, something strange started happening. Wherever European settlers went, bees seemed to arrive just ahead of them, spreading faster than the colonists themselves. According to historical accounts, including notes written by Thomas Jefferson, native tribes came to call honeybees the white man's fly, recognizing them as an early warning sign of expanding settlement. Some of these accounts describe tribal communities noticing the arrival of colonizers by tracking the spread of wild honeybee swarms moving westward across the continent. Think about that. An insect became an omen, a biological signal of massive cultural and territorial upheaval, arriving quietly, weeks or months before human settlers physically showed up. But this newly introduced species brought benefits too, at a scale nobody at the time could have predicted. As settlers cleared land and planted orchards, honeybees pollinated apple trees, clover fields, and eventually massive agricultural regions across the continent. Entire farming economies began to rely, often unknowingly, on these small immigrant insects working tirelessly in the background. By the 1800s, beekeeping had transformed from a mystical practice into an emerging science, and this is where one of history's most underappreciated heroes enters the story. His name was Lorenzo Langstroth, an American minister and beekeeper living in the mid-1800s, struggling with depression, physical illness, and constant financial hardship. Beekeeping had become his personal refuge, a quiet escape from the chaos of his mind. But Langstroth wasn't satisfied with the messy, destructive beekeeping methods of his time. For centuries, harvesting honey usually meant destroying the entire hive, killing thousands of bees just to access the honeycomb inside. Langstroth believed there had to be a better way. In 1851, after years of careful observation, he made a discovery that would change beekeeping forever. He noticed that bees needed a very specific amount of empty space between honeycomb structures, roughly 3/8 of an inch, in order to move freely without sealing the gaps shut. Too much space, and bees would fill it in with comb. Too little, and they would seal it up with sticky resin. It was a razor-thin margin that bees had been obeying instinctively for millions of years, and Langstroth was the first person to actually notice it. This measurement became known as bee space, and it allowed Langstroth to design something revolutionary: a hive with removable wooden frames, spaced perfectly, letting beekeepers inspect, harvest, and manage colonies without destroying them. It sounds simple. It wasn't. This single invention transformed beekeeping from a violent, wasteful practice into a sustainable industry. For the first time in human history, beekeepers could harvest honey repeatedly from the same healthy colony, year after year, without killing the bees. Langstroth's design became the foundation for nearly every modern beehive used around the world today. And yet, despite changing global agriculture forever, Langstroth died in poverty, largely unrecognized for his contribution during his lifetime. A man who quietly reshaped how humanity interacted with one of its most important species barely received credit while he was alive. History had another surprise waiting, though. The transformation Langstroth started was about to explode into something far bigger than one man's invention. As the 20th century progressed, agriculture began changing at a pace never seen before in human history. Farms grew larger, crops became more specialized. Massive monoculture fields stretched for miles, growing single crops like almonds, apples, and blueberries at an industrial scale. And here's the problem nobody fully anticipated. This new form of farming needed pollination on a scale wild bee populations simply couldn't provide naturally. So farmers turned to something extraordinary: migratory beekeeping. Beginning in the mid-1900s and accelerating dramatically by the 21st century, an entire industry emerged around transporting millions of honeybee colonies across the country on massive trucks. Every February, in California's Central Valley, one of the largest livestock migrations on Earth occurs, and almost nobody realizes it's happening. Nearly 2 million beehives, roughly 70% of all managed honeybee colonies in the United States, are trucked into California's almond orchards for a few critical weeks of pollination. Picture that scene. Thousands of 18-wheelers driving through the night, carrying pallets stacked with humming wooden boxes, each one containing tens of thousands of living bees. Truck drivers wearing protective gear, navigating highways in darkness because bees are calmer and less likely to fly during cool nighttime hours. This isn't small-scale farming anymore. This is an industrial pollination operation, moving billions of insects across state lines, all to guarantee that a single crop, almonds, can reproduce successfully. Modern agriculture had become entirely dependent on the tiny, ancient partnership between bees and flowers that began over 100 million years earlier. And that's exactly when the warning signs started appearing. Which brings us back to that terrifying summer of 2006, when beekeepers across the country began reporting mass disappearances. Colony collapse disorder wasn't isolated. It was widespread, unpredictable, and deeply alarming. Entire colonies, sometimes healthy just days earlier, would suddenly lose the majority of their worker bees, leaving the queen and a handful of young bees behind, unable to sustain the colony. Researchers scrambled for answers. Was it a virus, a parasite, pesticide exposure, climate stress? Here's the part that made the mystery so frustrating, and honestly, still makes it frustrating today. Even now, scientists have not settled on one single, universally agreed cause. There wasn't one villain. There appeared to be several, likely acting together. A tiny parasite called the Varroa mite, originally from Asia, had quietly spread across the globe. Picture a parasite the size of a dinner plate, latched onto a human body, feeding continuously. That's roughly the scale of what a Varroa mite does to a bee, attaching itself and draining the colony from within, while also spreading dangerous viruses between bees. At the same time, a class of pesticides called neonicotinoids, widely sprayed across industrial farmland, was found in multiple studies to interfere with a bee's sense of direction and weaken its immune system, almost like static interference in the signals a bee relies on just to find its way home. Researchers also pointed to other stressors working alongside these two: Poor nutrition caused by shrinking access to diverse wildflowers left many colonies weaker and less able to fight off disease. Habitat loss meant fewer wildflowers and less biodiversity overall. And climate change disrupted blooming cycles, throwing off the delicate timing between when flowers opened and when bees expected them to. Not one single threat, but several, converging on the same fragile system at once, and scientists are still working to fully untangle exactly how they interact. For the first time in modern history, humanity was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The ancient partnership between bees and plants, something so old it predated humans entirely, was now being destabilized by human activity itself. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because in response to this crisis, something remarkable happened. Ordinary people, not just scientists or politicians, began taking action. Urban beekeeping exploded in popularity in cities around the world. Rooftop hives appeared in New York, London, and Paris. School gardens began planting pollinator-friendly flowers. Farmers started experimenting with reduced pesticide use and wildflower borders around crop fields. Countries began passing legislation restricting certain harmful pesticides. The European Union banned several neonicotinoid pesticides for outdoor use, directly citing bee population collapse as justification. What's your take on this? Do you think humanity is doing enough to protect bee populations, or is this crisis being ignored until it's too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to happen. Meanwhile, scientists began studying bee behavior with renewed intensity, uncovering discoveries that reshaped our understanding of intelligence in the animal kingdom. Researchers found that honeybees can recognize individual human faces. They can count, distinguishing between different quantities of objects. They can even learn and teach each other complex tasks. But the most astonishing discovery of all was something happening in total darkness, deep inside the hive. Bees communicate through an intricate movement pattern known as the waggle dance. A returning forager bee performs a precise set of movements to tell the rest of the colony exactly where to find food, using the angle of the sun as a compass, and somehow, the other bees understand it perfectly. Think about the complexity hidden inside that discovery. A creature with a brain smaller than a grain of rice is capable of transmitting precise geographic coordinates to hundreds of other individuals, entirely through physical movement in complete darkness. It remains one of the most sophisticated forms of non-human communication ever documented. And here's the connection that ties this entire story back to your everyday life. Right now, today, 1 out of every 3 bites of food you eat exists because of pollinators. Managed honeybees perform a large share of that commercial pollination, especially for crops like almonds, but they don't do it alone. Native bees, butterflies, moths, and other wild pollinators are working alongside them, crop by crop, region by region. Almonds, apples, blueberries, cherries, cucumbers, avocados, coffee. Even the cotton in your clothing often depends on pollinator activity somewhere along the supply chain. This isn't a distant historical curiosity. This is happening in the produce aisle of your local grocery store, in the coffee you drink each morning, in the almond milk poured into your cereal. The ancient partnership between flowers and insects, born over 100 million years ago in a world dominated by dinosaurs, is now directly responsible for sustaining nearly 8 billion human beings. And that brings us to an uncomfortable but essential question about the future. The picture is more complicated than the bees are disappearing. Managed honeybee colonies, the ones beekeepers maintain and truck from farm to farm, are influenced heavily by how well they're cared for, and beekeepers in the United States have actually kept overall colony numbers relatively stable by rebuilding losses year after year. But that rebuilding comes at a real cost, both financial and biological, and it masks a harder truth. Many wild and native pollinator species, the thousands of solitary bees, bumblebees, and other insects that don't have beekeepers looking after them, are declining in many regions with far less attention and far less support. Climate change continues to disrupt ecosystems worldwide. Industrial agriculture continues expanding, often prioritizing short-term yield over long-term ecological balance. Scientists warn that without significant changes to pesticide use, habitat preservation, and sustainable farming practices, pollinator decline could accelerate in the coming decades, threatening food security on a global scale. Some researchers and companies have proposed radical alternatives, including robotic pollination drones designed to mimic bee behavior. Prototypes have already been tested in select environments, but so far, nothing artificial comes close to matching the efficiency, adaptability, and sheer biological intelligence of a living bee colony. Machines can mimic movement. They cannot replicate millions of years of evolutionary partnership between insect and flower. Which brings us back to where this story began. That eerie, silent summer of 2006, when beekeepers across America opened their hives and found nothing but silence. At the time, it felt like an isolated mystery, a strange, unexplained tragedy affecting a niche group of farmers and beekeepers. But now, you understand what was really happening. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was a warning echoing from a partnership that began over 100 million years ago, long before humans existed, long before agriculture, long before civilization itself. A tiny insect, no bigger than your fingernail, has quietly influenced human survival for thousands of years. It fed pharaohs, it fueled empires, it followed settlers across oceans and became an omen of cultural upheaval. It transformed from a mystical, sacred creature into the invisible backbone of modern industrial agriculture. And now, in the 21st century, its survival and our survival have become permanently, undeniably intertwined. The story of bees was never really about honey. It was never really about wax or candles or ancient rituals. It was always about something much bigger: cooperation, balance, the fragile, invisible threads connecting every living thing on this planet, including us. So the next time you see a bee land quietly on a flower in your backyard, take a second to actually notice it. That small, unremarkable moment is part of a chain of events stretching back over 100 million years, a chain that somehow, against all odds, still includes you. If this story changed the way you think about something as small as a bee, imagine what else in the natural world has been quietly shaping human history without you even realizing it. That's exactly the kind of story we tell here at Origin Tales. So if you want more hidden histories like this one, make sure you're subscribed, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the smallest creatures carry the biggest stories.